Call to order and roll call.
Chair Goss,
Here.
Vice Chair Noble,
Here.
Commissioner Waters,
Here.
Commissioner Swap,
Here.
Commissioner Marino is excused. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. All right. We are going to start with the approval of minutes, special meeting minutes of January 26, 2020. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Consideration of public comments. Those wishing to address the Planning and Zoning Commission need not request permission in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time pursuant to ARS 38-431. Hybrid meeting, in-person attendance, call-in participation, and written comments. In person, those wishing to address the commission in person do not need to pre-register, but space is limited and will be allotted on a first-come, first-served basis. Attendance priorities will be given to presenters first and then non-presenters. Call-ins, those wishing to address the commission by telephone will need to pre-register by 9:00 a.m. on April 12, 2020 by emailing planning@cityofkingman.gov and provide their address, name, telephone number, and that they will be using, email, agenda item they would like to comment on. Once registered, a link with additional instructions will be provided. Only those who have pre-registered will be admitted to the meeting. Written comments. All written comments must be submitted prior to 9:00 a.m. on April 12, 2020 by emailing planning@cityofkingman.gov or dropping off the comments at the Community Development Department in the main city complex at 310 North 4th Street. Members of the public can watch or listen to the meeting live via Channel 4 or on YouTube at youtube.com/cityofkingman. Have we received any public comments?
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we move to new business. Continual use permit CUP 22-0001. A request from Lenore Knutson, applicant and property owner for a continual use permit CUP to allow a recreational vehicle RV park on property in the T5 Main Street zone. The intended use is for a retro Airstream park known as Tin Can Alley that will feature up to 8 vintage trailers as Airbnb rentals. The subject property is located at 207 and 217 East Andy Devine Avenue and is further described as lots 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, and 21. Block 2 Kingman, Town Site APN 303-08-011. 016, 017, and 019. Can we have a report?
Good evening, Chair Goss and Vice Chair and members of the Commission. This is a conditional use permit application for Tin Can Alley. The applicant is Lenore Knutson, and the request is to review and approve a conditional use permit to allow a recreational vehicle park on property in the T5 Main Street T5 MS zone. The intended use is a retro Airstream park known as Tin Can Alley that will feature 8 vintage Airstream trailers as short-term Airbnb type rentals. The property is located at 207 and 217 East Andy Devine. We won't go through this slide. This is just the applicable sections of the zoning code that apply to this consideration of this CUP. So the site itself is located on the north side of Andy Devine Avenue between 2nd and 3rd Streets. It consists of 4 parcels totaling about 25,000 square feet or 0.58 acres. The general plan projected land use is community commercial. The property is served by water and sewer, which is located within the alley. The alley behind the site is about 25 feet in width. It is completely surrounded by improved roadways, sidewalks, curb gutter sidewalks on all sides. This slide shows the existing zoning in the area. As I mentioned, the property is zoned T5 AMS, which is the zone along the north side of Andy Devine for this from 1st to 8th Street. The area to the north along Beale Street is T5G. The property is between an existing car wash and the downtown post office. This map just shows its location within the historic district, which stretches from the powerhouse on the west to the train depot on the east. Some site photos. This is kind of taken between the two buildings that are on the site, which is the rock building on the left side of the picture there was built in 1915. According to the assessor's records, the building on the right was built in the late 1950s with an addition, I believe, in the 1970s. A couple more photos of the site, again showing the newer building from the 50s, which was previously a pet grooming salon. And then the property just to the east of the building is a kind of a parking area. That's all part of this property. So this, being that it's a conditional use permit, it's subject to the citizen review process and public notification process within our zoning code. The citizen review process requires the applicant to mail letters to the surrounding property owners. They did that. They also hand-delivered letters to property owners in February. They also held one-on-one conversations with several of the owners. In lieu of holding neighborhood meetings, this was approved by the community development manager, and the applicant reported that there were no objections and were generally supportive comments regarding the proposal. The city then, as its obligation, sent notices to the same property owners within 300 feet regarding this public hearing tonight. That was March 24th. We posted the site same day. Public notice was placed in the Kingman Minor on March 27th, and we have not received any comments from the public regarding this proposal. There were some department and agency comments. City engineering commented on on the possibility that if there was an increase in the impervious surface within the property, that would require a stormwater basin. However, that's based upon the engineer's analysis of the property. Driveway standards in the street policy would allow one driveway on from Andy Devine onto the property. There is one right now. The frontage is less than 200 feet. So their comment was a second driveway on Andy Devine would actually not be permitted. The building department had no comments. Frontier Communications has commented that they have major facilities in the alley that will have to be protected in place. There are no objections from Unisource, but that they should be contacted to help plan service. There are also no comments from Mojave County Flood Control. So this is the concept plan that was submitted, that was in your packet. I understand the applicant has prepared an alternative that she would like to share with you this evening, which eliminates the driveway on Andy Devine. But basically, the concept would be to have 8 Airstream units on the property. 4 units that are closest to the alley would be kind of a first phase, and then the 4 units that would be closer to the driveway would be, looks like a later phase. One of the units that's on the right or the east side of the property is a proposal for a ADA accessible unit with an ADA accessible parking space adjoining it. There are several recreation areas shown on the site. Plan is to have the property surrounded on 3 sides by a block wall. Although it's not a part of the scope of the CUP, the applicant is also intending to use the existing buildings for a couple businesses, potentially a coffee shop and a ice cream shop. And at our last meeting okay. I'll go ahead and give you, the commission members, the updated alternative site plan.
Thank you, Richard.
As you recall, when we last met in January, we considered an amendment to the zoning code to allow the site to be considered for an RV park. And that was approved by the council in February. So this is under those new regulations. One of the changes is that a property less than 2 acres can be considered for an RV park in the T5 MS zone. And this property, as I mentioned, is just over half an acre. Permitted uses, RVs are allowed to be either stationary or movable. In this case, they are intended to be stationary only. There's an existing statement in the code that says up to 15% of the site may be used for tent sites. I know the applicant's not intending to have any camping on the site. Also is not intending to have any permanent residence. However, we are recommending those be conditions of approval just to ensure that this does not turn into, say, a regular RV park at some point in the future. Accessory structures, the applicant's plans did show some patio awnings, or shade structures, I should say, and those are allowed as accessory structures in RV parks. Now, the number of units on the property is in conformance with the code. As I mentioned, there's 4 parcels currently, and they would need to be combined. Park spaces in this zone must be at least 1.5 times the square footage of the trailer unit. If the parking space is another location in the park, which in this case, the parking spaces would be across the driveway next to the, kind of next to the coffee shop. Based upon some measurements we took of the sizes of the trailers, we estimated somewhere between 345 and 435 square feet per unit would have to be designated as the park space for that, for that trailer. And that information would need to be shown on the site plan. Minimum setbacks are 10 feet from the RV space to the park perimeter. The earlier plan did seem to show that some of the units might be closer than that. I believe the revised plan shows it being meeting those requirements. Mentioned that there are fences shown across or on the exterior of the property. 6-foot tall block walls proposed. That is a requirement of the code. Also, the commission can determine whether a wall is required along the street side, which in this case would be Corsaigne and Divine. Staff is recommending not requiring a wall along the frontage for visibility reasons. There also may be the need for some wall openings for fire apparatus and access, especially in the alley to the north. Also, there may need to be location for secondary access or pedestrian access for guests. Street access, as I mentioned, a second driveway wouldn't be permitted, although it would be possible to share access. There's an existing driveway on the post office property to the east, so possibly that would be an alternative if that could be worked out with a shared cross-access agreement. Another option would be have a secondary access to the alley, or as the applicant has shown in their revised site plan, they may just have a single access. Final determination on that will be done in consultation with the city engineer. And then finally, recreation areas. Again, the requirement is 200 square feet per RV space, so 1,600 square feet would have to be provided. The site plan does seem to show several rec areas on the site. I kind of mentioned that this is located within the Historic Overlay District. The Heritage Preservation Commission did review this concept plan in February. They approved a certificate of appropriateness with the following conditions. This is regarding to the colors of the building. There was a condition regarding preservation of the stone materials on the building at 207 East Andy Vine, and condition regarding the proposal to do an Art Deco style remodel of the building at 217 East Andy Vine, and that would be, if something other than that were to be done, it would require further review by the HPC. And these are the buildings that are that we're talking about. And again, they're not really a subject of the CUP, but they are on the same property, and they will be utilized by the applicant. And the picture below just kind of shows their intention of how they may remodel the building above. So this is the public hearing process. It does go just before the Planning and Zoning Commission. It does not go to the council unless your decision this evening is appealed. So there are required findings for a CUP that are in the code. The first one is that the conditional use is consistent with the objectives of the code and the purpose of the zone for which the site is located. So in the transit zones, including this zone, they're intended to reinforce historic areas and facilitate the development of walkable, mixed-use urban environments. The development of Tin Can Alley, we believe, will be consistent with this purpose. One of the things is that they will not have kitchens within the units, and the intent would be to encourage their guests to patronize their restaurants in the area, business in the area, rather than use the units for cooking purposes. So that would help support that purpose in the code. Second is the granting of the conditional use will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare. And this includes property damage, nuisances, hazards, or traffic impacts that could be created. And we didn't see any apparent impacts or nuisance or hazards that would be generated if it's developed as proposed, and we don't expect any significant traffic to be generated. Findings that are required for the CUP approval include characteristics of the proposed use, is compatible with the surrounding area. The CUP shall only be issued when it is determined that the applicant has addressed certain issues to ensure compatibility. First one has to do with the bulk regulations, height, setbacks, so on. And it appears that the bulk regulations of the zone can be met. I mentioned there's an ongoing discussion on secondary access, but this is unlikely to generate significant traffic. There are some recreational open space requirements that will have to be met as a condition. We don't believe there's any noise, light, or visual pollutants that would be arising from this development. The existing buildings, as I mentioned, are subject to the CUP approval. As far as any new structures happening on the property, the only thing that might occur would be the shade structures, and those are allowed as an accessory use. Landscaping will have to be in accordance with our landscaping section of the code. There'll have to be coordination with the utility companies and the city of Kingman to provide the necessary services to the units, including water and sewer, as well as electric service. Also, future signage will need to be in accordance with the sign standards. There is an existing billboard on the property, and that may be removed as part of the development of the site. No additional dedications to right-of-way or development streets adjoining the property is anticipated. There's no known prehistoric or natural resources on the property, and in terms of historic resources, HPC did approve a certificate of appropriateness for this project with certain conditions. So the staff recommendation for the CUP is to approve the proposal at 207 East Sandy Divine and 217 East Sandy Divine by affirming the findings in the code and attaching the following conditions. A, that a maximum of 8 Airstream trailers which are stationary and permanently affixed to the ground shall be allowed with no movable RV units allowed. B, trailers shall not have cooking facilities or be used as permanent residences. C, no camping shall be allowed. D, the site plan shall indicate the area of each unit space in accordance with the code. E, the site plan shall indicate a minimum setback of 10 feet from the trailer unit spaces to the park perimeter in accordance with the code. F, a 6-foot-high wall or fence is required to be constructed for screening purposes along the exterior property lines except along Andy Divine, and or where vehicular or pedestrian access is needed or required for emergency access as determined by the fire chief in consultation with city engineering. G, that all on-site parking spaces and the internal drive will be paved with a dustless surface of asphalt or concrete. H, that final determination on the location of a second access, if any, would be subject to the subject property will occur in consultation with city engineering during the site plan review process. And then finally, I, the site plan shall indicate at least 1,600 square feet of recreational area will be provided on the site. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Richard. Does anyone have any questions?
Sure, I do. Rich, the way you're prohibiting these from becoming permanent residences is by limiting the cooking facilities, right? So there's no kitchen in these?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So there could be a microwave though, right? Or something along those lines for the guests?
My understanding is that the applicant is not going to have anything in there that would allow them to cook. They might have some type of, I don't know if there's going to be a refrigerator in that. You might ask her that question, but our understanding is there's not going to be a kitchen or any type of stove inside the units.
Great. Okay, and I see that these units are treated as permanent structures somehow, or that's the language in there.
They would be permanently fixed to their location. They wouldn't be moving in and out of the site, and we wouldn't be allowing any movable units to go in there under this condition A. So it would just be the 8 units, maximum 8 units that would be permanently fixed on the site.
So going back to the last meeting, if one of them burnt down, they'd have to go through a CUP process to add another one in? Or what's?
No,
They just pull another
if
trailer?
one of them was, say, removed for some reason or was damaged or something, as long as they didn't exceed 8 units, that would be allowed.
So I haven't seen in here any sort of limitation on what type of mobile home could actually be pulled in and reconverted if that happened.
It says Airstream in the first, in A.
Is that actually being enforced by the city though, or checked in any way?
Well, it would be a condition, if approved, it would be a condition that we could enforce. It would be part of the CUP approval, that this is exactly what they would be allowed to do. And we wouldn't allow, as I mentioned, we wouldn't allow camping. You couldn't have other types of trailers in there. Regular RVs wouldn't be able to come and go from the site.
Well, specifically from how it was applied, it was 60s and 70s Airstream trailers. Now, I did a quick Google search, and within about a minute, I found a way of specifically identifying which serial numbers correspond with 60s and 70s Airstream trailers. Could we use that information to limit what RVs are allowed on this property in the future?
I mean, I think you can get fairly specific if you wanted to, say, give a range of decades or something like that. We could include that in your approval.
Well, yeah, because the last meeting, it was mentioned that the CUP was the place to do things like this. So I'm hoping that we could restrict this from, say, the park models that you see. If you go down to Pica toward the baseball field, those are 60s and 70s trailers, and that's the type of thing that could be pulled onto this lot in the future. I mean, all the commissioners here probably know that I'm pretty skeptical of how this is going to work for the city long term. So I'd like to see something like that put into this.
I mean, you could, in your motion, you could include a condition for a range of decade or something along those lines.
Could it be specific to the VIN or serial number on the Airstream?
I'm not really sure on that. I mean, we don't typically check VIN numbers, but, but I think you could certainly specify a range that you felt comfortable that would be keeping with the historic nature of the area. And, the Airstreams go back, pretty far into the past, but,
Well, specifically with 60s and 70s listed in this application, I'd like to hold the
right.
applicant to that. And again, the last meeting, we were told that the CUP would be the time to do this. I just want to make sure that we can actually do this. I'm not sure if it involves going back and coming forward again, but I'd like to see that included.
No, you could amend, these conditions of approval are staff recommendations. You can add conditions, you can modify the conditions that you see on the screen there in your motion. You can do that.
Great.
Okay.
And last meeting, it's been months now, Commissioner Noble, I believe, or maybe it was Goss, mentioned that, asked whether or not there could be some sort of limit on how long the stay was for these. How would that work? Would that actually be reported to us by the actual the applicant here as they're running their business, or how would you get that information on how their business is being run?
Yeah, I mean, our intent is not to be checking to make sure, someone's not there more than 2 weeks or not more there than 2 months. I think the applicant has indicated these are just short-term, a couple of weekend, maybe a week at the most. And, we would be kind of following that understanding. If, I think it'd be kind of obvious if someone's there much longer than that period.
So the city isn't using a service like AirDNA or Granicus to check the short-term rentals in the area to figure out what the actual stay times are for those rentals?
I don't know of anyone that's checking that.
All right. Now, again, there was concerns last time that these would become extended stay, trailer parks basically. So I'd like to see something there, but I don't know if it's even possible based on what I'm hearing. Other than that, I believe there's going to be some discussion with Commissioner Noble regarding the wall that he asked to be put in around the lot last time, the screening. So I'd like to see where that goes.
I don't have any comments on the wall at this time.
Are you okay with the, sorry, Commissioner? Are you okay with
We have a group discussion after this, so let's just, we'll just talk to Rich real quick.
Okay.
Does anybody have any extra questions for Rich?
Yes, just a clarification on the permanency issue. So part of the CUP approval could be giving a certain amount of time that we identify as permanent. So no longer than a 1 month, 4-week stay.
I think you could say something like that in there. And I use the word permanent residences, but it's not defined. But, and also speaking to Commission Member Waters' concerns, I think you could put a maximum time in there.
Yeah.
And that way, if we became aware that something was happening where they were longer than that period of time, at least we have a time certain that we could say, oh yeah, okay, you're not in compliance with the CUP, and it would be one of the reasons that you could potentially bring it back to the commission for review and potential revocation if there was a serious problem.
Correct. It wouldn't be to police
Right.
or to be spying. The purpose would be if it became apparent that there
Right.
was a permanent resident, then it would give us some ability to readdress it.
Right.
I'd just like to add something about that. So the state statutes actually establish what would be considered a permanent residency. So that's already in the law book. And so by stating that it can't be used as a permanent residency, it's kind of already in line. So that's just something to think about as well. I don't know what those are. But I know in situations like this, you start getting into the landlord-tenant type rules and laws. And the last time I dealt with something like that, I think it was if they were there for 3 weeks, then it could be established as a permanent residency. So just keep in mind that some of that stuff's already listed out in other, I guess, statutes or administrative laws that are there. So what we have there those would also apply to that. So.
Thank you.
I have one other question for you, Rich. So C says no camping is allowed. What is camping? Does it have a technical definition?
We may have a definition in our code. Unfortunately, I think Sean's looking at the code.
Because I feel like we're talking about tents. Is that, because, I mean, to me, camping is being in an Airstream. So,
Right. I mean, you could specify no tent camping if that's.
I'm just wondering what we're getting at with saying no camping.
Yeah, that was the intent, is that there'd be no tents on the property.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because if camping means tents, then we could leave it as camping. Otherwise, we might just want to change it to no.
I think it's probably a broader term than just tents, so you may want to include that word in there, no tent camping, rather than just no camping.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Does anybody else have questions for Richard? Okay, thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll now open it up for public comment. If anybody would like to address the commission, please come forward and state your name.
Commissioners, my name is Lenore Knutson, and I'm the applicant for this project. You have in front of you a revised site plan. After I received the recommendations from council, then the architect went back to work on making sure that those requirements were met. And I have to say that, I'm a little astounded by some of the limitations and conversation, considering the fact that we have very dilapidated properties that are about to be improved. I think, in fact, it was at the previous meeting where there was some discussion about burning those buildings down would be an improvement, at least the Print My Pet building. And we have set out to do that. With respect to some of the concerns that have been raised here today, first of all, what keeps this from being a permanent residence is that for anyone, not just kitchens, is that we have no permission to do that. So we don't have a permitted use to allow people to live there permanently. And by not having kitchens, we are encouraging each and every one of these guests to walk the Main Street community and buy their meals at restaurants, just like you would in a hotel, if you went to a hotel. That's what these will be set up like. Now, if I am fortunate enough to have a guest that can afford to stay there a month, in addition to I'd be celebrating, frankly. But these are listed on a website. It will be Airbnb. It will probably also be HipCamp, or it could also be VRBO. At any point, any of you could check and see what is the listing that's described. If the city feels as though they need to police to that degree and to be that involved as a government entity, go for it. I appreciate the VIN number strategy, but I also want to point out here what you have versus what you will be getting with this project. I have been upfront all along about the fact that, and I've purchased 5 of these to date. They're all 60s and 70s units, but I've been very upfront all along that ADA unit will be a difficult one to come by. I'm not required to put an ADA unit in there. I'm doing it because my entire adult life has been dedicated to advocating on behalf of people with disabilities. And so I have gone back and forth with the architect about making sure that the ADA unit is not sectioned off by itself and isolated. It needs to be given the same treatment as all the other units. But in all probability, I'm going to need to come up with a triaxle wide-body Airstream for that unit. And it could be an 80s unit. We are completely gutting them down to the ribs. It is not financially viable for me to buy brand new ones and strip them down and retrofit them to our purpose. They will have a queen-size bed in each one, a regular standard queen-size bed with a high-quality mattress. It will have a regular standard shower and a regular residential toilet, and it will have a bar area, like in a hotel room, where you'd have a small bar-sized sink so that somebody can dump something out in there. They will have water coolers in there so that we won't be looking at providing any plastics in these units at all. There will be no plastics. There'll be no shampoo in plastics or anything else. We've taken great care to plan every detail of this to give the city of Kingman something phenomenal. And with respect to what I feel is the disparate treatment that, in particular, Commissioner Waters is demonstrating towards this project, and also the personal view that he interjected into our last meeting with his view of not wanting to explain to his son why there were airstreams on that property. I think we all remember that conversation. He's taken a personal view of this rather than what's best for the city of Kingman, and it is a bit troubling, the level of government that's being inserted into this project. I could leave those parcels as is. I could leave them exactly as they are with the hot pink trim on the Print My Pet building and a stone building that has not been occupied for over 2 decades. I can leave them exactly the way they are, or we can improve them together. But I think it's incredibly important, at least for me tonight, to have a voice. Can I provide you with another handout? I feel as though I need to have a voice here.
Thank you.
Fairness to anyone. I mean, I'm not a big-time developer. I live in this community. Our children play soccer. This is me attempting to make improvements for the community in which I live every day, and I have since 2004. So I'd like to take just a minute of your time so that you can hear my voice in this process. And I'm going to start off with a quote from one of our founding fathers, because Thomas Jefferson said, "Equal rights for all, special privileges for none." And I'd like that to just sink in a little bit, because that is really, this quote goes to the heart of my request to the commission. As a government body, you have an obligation to be fair and equal in your application of Kingman's zoning laws. Reserving special privileges for a few is the antithesis of government and government's role, standing as an abomination, really, to the equal application of Kingman's laws. Yet, since I started this process back in September when I first met with the city, and I set off on this journey to develop these 4 lots now known as Tin Can Alley, along with a vibrant coffee shop, and also revitalizing and breathing life into a building that has been sitting vacant for decades. We have repeatedly observed examples of special privileges, and I want to bring to your attention just a few. These special privileges seem to be reserved for a special few. The first picture here, number 1, if I can ever get final approval to even move 1 shovel of dirt, which I haven't gotten yet, even though I've been meeting with the city since September, but I'm hanging in there because this is my town, this is my community again. I will be held to a level of a standard of erecting a 6-foot wall or fence on 3 sides at tremendous expense to me. I'm not objecting to that condition, but I am pointing out to you photograph 1, which is a concrete barrier that has been erected in our downtown community months ago without interference from you as governing officials. Right? This is the fence now on Beale Street between the Standard newspaper and Circle K. I'm being held to a different standard. It seems as though there are a select few in our community that get away with things like this, but it certainly wouldn't be me. Number 2, on February 25th at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting, I was questioned in detail about my color palette and color choices for the now pink-trimmed Print My Pet building. They were going to withhold approval until I agreed to either come back before them with a color palette or to offer my word that I would use desert hues. I'm not necessarily even objecting to that, but I was specifically told at the Historic Preservation Committee meeting that turquoise could not be used, that there were no more buildings in downtown Kingman that were going to be in turquoise. So take a look at the next two pictures. Number 2 here is just in the last couple of weeks, in the same T5 Main Street district, this building was painted bright orange. Again, a select few, because I'm being held to a standard of needing to prove up that I'm going to use desert hues in the Print My Pet building. If you flip to the next one, it's photograph number 3. Somehow, since I met with the Historic Preservation Commission, we now have a flame motif on Beale Street. But yet I'm held to the standard of promising to use desert hues or being forced to come back before another layer of government to get approval. And then if you look at the next one, I'm sure you all recognize this building as well. Used to be brick. It is now white and turquoise, the very color that I was told I couldn't use. And it's being painted right now. Not months ago, not before I was told that. Right now, all of these examples have been since I appeared before the Historic Preservation Commission on February 25th. I have repeatedly been told, and you can read it in the recommendations in the staff report tonight, that I must have parking to accommodate all guests in Tin Can Alley, as well as parking for the 2 other buildings on the property. And when you read those recommendations, my parking also has to be paved inside. Right? Yet I point out the complete lack of on-site parking for Central Church, the theater that's being renovated right now as we speak, most of the businesses along Beale Street, and Andy Devine Avenue, and the motorcycle repair shop currently under development right now as we speak. They have no on-site parking there. So, while I'm being forced to bear the additional expense of paved parking on the interior of the project, one property owner on Beale Street, and it's picture number 4, has completely eliminated all on-site parking. This is all since I've started this application process. So I ask all of you, how can you hold me to a standard that is not being enforced anywhere else? Color schemes, parking, walls, general condition. Keep in mind that I have 4 parcels there, 4 separate parcels. I was told by one city employee not to combine them because I would be able to have, each parcel can have a driveway, right? You can't landlock parcels in this city. But now I'm being held to the standard of, I can't have another driveway. I'm willing to work with many of these conditions, but the micromanagement and the special privileges that are afforded to a few by this commission and the city council, to me, are absolutely objectionable and the antithesis of fair government. So I provided you with current examples of this disparate treatment and sometimes special privilege offered to some business owners in the city of Kingman, but clearly not others. I'm only requesting what the city affords to others. I'm not requesting any special treatment. I'm requesting what you afford to others. Please approve the project without limitations on parking or color palettes. And now I have to add VIN numbers for Airstreams. That level of government oversight is astounding. And so I would ask that there be no discussion or recommendation regarding VIN numbers. This is a conditional use permit. It is a permitted use in the city of Kingman. And I have given you architectural plan after architectural plan that have been responsive to every request. The level of government that you're suggesting is not only objectionable, it's offensive. So I'm going to close with one more quote from one of our founding fathers. There can be no truer principle than this, Commissioner Waters. Every individual of the community at large has an equal right to the protection of government, and that is me today before you. the words of Alexander Hamilton ring true today. So I request again that you approve this without any limitations on parking, color palettes, or VIN numbers, or years of Airstream. What would be so objectionable if I put a brand new one in there, which I have no intention of doing? But if one of them burned down 5 years down the road, and the only thing I had available was a brand new Airstream, would that be so awful for Kingman? I just can't imagine the level of government that you're trying to apply to this project when all you have to do is look around, look at the pictures that I've given you tonight to give you clear examples of that's not happening elsewhere. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to have my voice heard in this process. I'm happy to answer any questions for you. And I, again, ask that you consider this in government's true role, being equally applied to all citizens in Kingman.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant while they're here?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any more public comment? Approach the microphone and state your name, please.
Hi there. My name is Christopher Donis. I'm Donis Law here in town. I've been here, and if I go over, I don't know what my time limits are. It's the first time I've ever done this. I usually make fun of the crazy people that come up here and scream and yell, so I guess I'm going to join them now. Basically, I don't know a lot about the specifics of this, what's going on here. I've heard some things from some higher level people at the courts that I work with. Kind of a general comment I guess I have, and what I've heard since I kind of came in, I'm somewhat familiar with the project, but just generally what I've heard is from other people, and I perhaps may be incorrect. I don't know, but I'm going to say it anyway. So when my wife and I moved here, it was because Kingman was awesome. We loved the Route 66 vibe. We loved the Americana vibe. We wanted to get out of California. I lived in San Diego, great city, best weather in the world. I wanted to come here, and we loved it when we got here. We eventually had to move because of the of our child, but I'm still here all the time, and I practice here every day, well, every week pretty much. So the problem I have is that I've heard some ramblings, and it sounds like, based on what I heard here from the person speaking before, that they perhaps are true, that there's government overreach that I would expect to see in San Francisco, or I would expect to see in San Diego. I am shocked that what I've seen here and what I'm hearing and what people were saying, again, some of it might be not true, I have no idea, but that's not what this town is about. I've been here, I'm low on the totem pole, I know way less people than you all do, but that's not what this town is about. This town is about people that are building businesses, small business. We don't want government intrusion. Maybe some of you do, I have no idea what any of your political affiliations are. My general understanding of this town and this county was that we support small business. We support development of frickin', this is amazing. This is amazing. So if I was on the council, and I never will be, we'll never run for public office, but if I did, I would say, wow, you have a person, and I think I heard lived here for 2004 or something, so a local person, this isn't some big flashy California person coming in flashing money at you. This is a local person who is investing her money into this community. And she's getting roadblock after roadblock, it sounds like. Why? Why on earth in Mojave County, Kingman, Arizona, is that happening? And I have no idea who's, you guys might be on our side. I have no idea what the specifics are. But any of you that are acting like that, I will tell you that please reconsider. That's not what this town is about. That's not what this county is about. That's not what America is about. I mean, if she was opening up a strip club or something, fine. This is a Airstream trail, it's unbelievable. Airbnb, that's what the whole vibe is. Look at this thing right there on the wall. Like when you guys did the big sign and that's awesome. People are out there taking pictures. That's the future of this town. I've been trying to get somebody to do a drive-in out a little bit. I mean, it's all here. There's so much potential. And you've got a local person put not just their mouth, their money into something. It sounds like a lot from what I just heard. And people are given her roadblocks? Why? How in this day and age, in this town, in this community, this is not San Francisco. I did an LLM in tax in San Francisco. I don't even like going near that town anymore. I feel like I'm there when I'm hearing what I'm hearing. And again, maybe some of what they're saying over there, what I heard, are just rumors. We all know there's a lot of rumors around here, so I could be totally wrong about a lot of it. But if you're one of the ones giving someone roadblocks to build this community that clearly cares about this community in so many ways and has worked in the government here for so long, why are we stifling that? That doesn't make any sense. It benefits all of us. And again, this is not, Brad Pitt coming in saying, I'm going to open a drive-in and bring a bunch of nonsense into town. That's not what this is. This is she's focusing on the best part of Kingman is the Americana, the Route 66. That's why we were attracted to this town. And the politics of small business and government over there. Let the people decide. Let the people come in when you need to come in, but don't come in and ruin small business. I beg you, please, whatever and again, I don't even know what I'm asking for. I'm asking for to have a different take on this or any future projects. And speaking on behalf of myself and many people that in this town that couldn't be here tonight, we were talking about this today and before. Come on, I mean, this place is awesome. It's awesome. This town is awesome. It has so much potential, and something like this is exactly the kind of thing that this town needs and is going to benefit everybody with tax revenue, with people coming in, new places opening up. Why would we act like San Francisco? It doesn't make any sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any more public comment? Approach the microphone and state your name, please.
Afternoon. My name is Ralph O'Donnell. I actually own the 210 Beale Street property right behind them across the alley. I think it's bold. It's a great idea. It's different. Hopefully, it sounds like there's a lot of issues to go through, or we've been trying to work through them. But I personally would like to see the city work with ideas like this. I myself would like to do something with my property, like an open air venue, outdoor venue type thing. We haven't moved forward with that yet. And it's my understanding that, and I came from the Verde Valley, from Cottonwood, and it's my understanding that old Kingman was working with or trying to follow Old Town Cottonwood's revitalization program, and I'm kind of proud to say that it was kind of neat to say that I came from Cottonwood. Now, Old Town over there is hopping. Hopefully, and we moved to Kingman because my business pretty much transitioned over here, the majority of the business. So we've been here for about 18 years. And one of the reasons, other than business primarily being here into this area, was the opportunities that Kingman and Mojave County had over the Verde Valley even. Two different areas, but they both have their own allures and benefits. So I'm right behind them. I would like to see something from the city open up and continue to support the revitalization of Old Town. I think it's a great idea, and I've been impressed with what has happened mostly on Beale Street. I guess that's more of a different zoning area or something like that. But I'm for the growth and support of the community, and I think that she has a bold idea with the travel trailers. But everything else, like I said, everything else, the parklets on Beale Street, that's kind of a cool idea. I thought that was kind of cool. And some of the new visionary plans, projected plans that I've seen for Beale Street, I personally I would support her.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, I'm going to close public comment and open it up for commission discussion.
since my name was mentioned a few times, I guess I should explain to the commissioners where I'm coming from. Now, what I've seen with this project is nothing but support from other commissioners, the Historic Preservation Commission, the council, and also just with the paper, the newspaper, it's all been positive. If anything, I've been the stick in the mud, but it's because I don't speak for a living. I actually value properties. That's what I do. And there is a negative influence when you introduce trailers or mobile homes, RV parks in areas. I've actually seen it in statistics. This exists because there's a different life cycle associated with mobile parks. They decline at a higher rate or quicker than the surrounding properties, and because of the principle of conformity, they're all kind of the same. And you know it, you see it. This town has struggled with mobile parks in the past, or even now. I mean, if you go across the street, you go down 4th Street, right across from our beautiful courthouse right here, just go right down Old Trails Road, and you'll see a trailer park there with 60s and 70s model trailers. The city doesn't know what to do with it. Same again, if you go down to Topeka, go to the baseball park, you'll see what we used to call Felony Flats when we were a kid. It's still there, and it's an eyesore. What I'm worried about is that this business may start out with a lot of gusto, but eventually that could fade. And then we could have a Boudica around our neck right there next to the powerhouse. And I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I would very much like to see the VINs restricted on these things, or the serial number or whatever, so that we know what we're getting with these parks. Eventually we might get somebody that's unscrupulous, unlike the applicant, that might actually start creating a long-term trailer park. And that's what I said. My exact quote wasn't, how can I leave an Airstream trailer park for my son? It was actually, how can I leave a trailer park downtown? Again, it seems like if there's one art to being on planning and zoning, it's where you put your trailer parks in a town, and we should be pretty careful with it. That's all I'm saying. I would just really like you to consider long-term, if this thing becomes something that we don't want, that this is the opportunity we have to prevent that from happening. So, hope that allays your concerns.
Thank you. That's really helpful to understand that perspective. When I think about if the requirement is Airstream, I can't imagine Airstreams, as far as I understand, are the top of the line. So it seems like if they're willing to replace with other Airstreams, then that will prevent that from turning into being able to purchase cheap, old, worn down RVs and replacing them. The other thing that I am thinking about is that even if this project, if glamping is attractive to people for a couple of decades, and this cleans up this area and builds up this area for a couple of decades and incentivizes and motivates other people around them to do that, and then someone does something else, then it may well have served that purpose for that time period. I don't know if we can look at the whole end of things right now, but I do appreciate understanding where you're coming from. I think the biggest concern that I have is about the permanency. If someone can stay for 6 months, if that's not considered permanent, then we could end up accruing things outside of the RV units that detract from the general appeal of it.
I will add one thing about the long-term stay. So I have, my parents like to travel, and they like to travel and they like to stay places. And my parents have stayed in the beach club in Disney World for 2 months before because they don't have a good idea of what they want to do with their money other than travel. So, and I don't think they were a detriment in any way to Disney World because they were there for that long. So I will say that I don't think that necessarily, even if you stay someplace on vacation for a period of time, it's necessarily a bad thing. I do think that we should probably figure out what the definition of permanent resident is, just so that we have an idea of what it is. And I think that enforcement is always a very difficult thing in Kingman. And my guess is that the term permanent resident will probably take care of it if something like that were to come up, since that is significantly not the purpose of this kind of property. But I think putting it at a level of like 1 or 2 months is just going to be really difficult, because there's going to be no oversight of anybody. There's nobody looking at things on that level in this town. And also, if somebody were to stay for 2 months and they were on vacation, like my parents have been, it's not necessarily a horrible thing. So there is a possibility of staying for a while just because people like to travel.
Chair Goss, during the last meeting, the applicant, she actually mentioned some of the hotels, that were causing problems downtown. Why not build a hotel or whatever? Well, those are extended stay at this point, at least the 2 ones that you're probably familiar with if you go up the hill, and the same thing can happen in a trailer park easy, but those extended stays, I don't know, they do become run down, and they become like a dwelling of last resort for people at some point. And I know right now the Airbnb is booming, but it's just last year they had the pandemic, and you guys probably got the emails where they were begging to take virtual stays at Airbnb. So, I mean, I understand that right now it's going to be profitable, but at some point maybe there'll be an Airbnb dry up when, another pandemic happens or something. Who knows? Again, I'm not trying to be a liberal or whatever, or paranoid. I mean,
Talk again when you're done or not?
that would
Not
be
right
the
now, thank you.
discretion. But if you go to some place like San Francisco, that you have a pretty good idea of a place that actually isn't following zoning codes, So, I mean, when I joined this commission, I pointed out that I've been to Haiti, and I've seen places that don't have planning and zoning. So I think it's important that we do actually apply some rules when we allow new businesses to come in here.
So at the last meeting, I think we discussed term limits. I think we just added term limit to this, and it comes back to the commission in 5 years. It can be reviewed again then. I think that's probably the easiest way to address your guys' concerns.
Yeah, we did talk about adding like a period of review if that's, something that you're worried about long-term. I will add, though, that if this project does go forward, they will be significantly improving this property, right? So we have that going into effect. And then if something, catastrophic were to happen and people weren't putting money into things the way they were, honestly, the whole world sort of fell apart it wasn't just, these kind of properties, like, restaurants were closing, and we've got all these other things. So I think, like, if something does happen where, money dries up and things turn out, like, not appropriately, this is going to be no worse off than a lot of the other buildings in the area. So I don't see that as a particular reason to say no to this project, but.
Well, Chair Goss, it does point to the fact that this thing could become something that we don't want in the future, namely a trailer park that's not in good shape right by the powerhouse. And the location is important to me. We have the Amtrak travel that goes through here. People can see it on their Route 66 right by it. Again, I'm not for putting a trailer park here, but we're past that conversation. But I just think we need to be really careful with how we're approaching this. So, thank you.
I'm comfortable with the level of planning that Ms. Knudsen has put into this, and I think the investment that she's making into the project will necessitate that this doesn't turn into a rundown trailer park, at least, and I believe that. I really believe that. I actually like the idea of a block wall around it. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that. I think that will make it look really attractive. I was curious when she was talking about the parking and the paint colors. I guess what I was thinking about is that it is important when people are willing to take the investment and time to try to create good business for Kingman, that we do our best to support them in line with the city code. So I just was curious about your thoughts about the parking and the paint colors.
So we don't, when we approve the CUP, we don't necessarily specify paint colors, but that does lie within the historic preservation code. To the level that people in the city are following what they have been given by the Historic Preservation Committee, that's not something that unfortunately we can control. However, that is something that if a citizen is concerned about, they can bring to us, or bring to the Planning and Zoning Commission about finding out more about violations that are going on in the community. But we can just do our best to follow the code, and then to the level that people actually adhere to that, unfortunately, that's not something that we ourselves are policing. So I don't have particularly one thing or another to say about the paint colors, because that's not something that I'm involved in. I would say that with the revision of the code, we are requiring certain parking spaces as part of the code. Again, like I said, to the extent that other people are not following that, I don't have a whole lot to say, because I'm not in the enforcement of it. But what we're recommending here for the parking spaces are in line with the current changes that have been made to the code. So if we wanted to make an exception to that, I think it would be a little bit tricky, because then we would be justifying differences that, you know, in some of these examples are not from us to be justified. So that's my particular perspective.
Hey, Commissioner Noble, Chair Goss, I think you mentioned there was a five-year review where you go through this, like a checkup on the CUP. Because that was a takeaway last time, but that's official. And that would be included in this, like in 5 years?
No, we're doing the CUP right now, so that would
We
be
would have to
part of this one.
request it in, like, into this CUP.
Okay, add it to. If somebody
Like
wants to
a
put that
F.
forward, I'll second it.
Okay.
Chair Goss, I just want to point out that there is, as we mentioned in the last meeting, there is, of course, always your ability to review conditions of a conditional use permit if they're not being followed, and that can be done at any time. We have examples of CUPs that have had time limits or, you know, requirements to come back, but generally, it wasn't so that they could be repealed. It was more or less just a report as to the, you know, the conditions of the CUP, and then if there was a problem, there would have to be an additional hearing, you know, on that.
Okay, one question is every CUP then following
No.
that same, or you would have to add that in?
You would have to add that in as a condition of what you're considering tonight.
Okay.
But I think generally the way to handle it is through, stating your conditions, and if those conditions are not followed, we can bring that back to you, to your attention for a hearing if it's needed.
So
Perfect.
instead of having to go through the whole process again, we just get a staff report, something like that.
If that's a condition, if you wish to have a report
it'd
at
be a
some
lot easier if we didn't
point in
have
the
to go through
future,
this
we
whole
can
process
provide
again.
that to you.
Yeah.
And as I said, if there's a violation of a condition that you've placed on the property, that can be brought back to you for review in a public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Rich.
Mhm.
Would that make you more comfortable with the project?
That, and again, restricting what types of trailers could be put on that property.
So, one question for you. So why do you like the 60s and 70s ones over the 80s and 90s, or the?
Sure, because it was put in the application, the original application. And, you know, I guess we could put in there something for Airstreams that might actually work.
Because that's in
You guys
section
want
A, it specifies that they have to be Airstreams.
Yeah. I'm not,
Anything later is going to be nice, is going to be more expensive and nicer.
Right.
okay, so we're all talking the toaster trailers. that
The
are
silver ones that
with-
look like,
with
the silver
The
Twinkies.
Airstream.
Is it- Again, I know products have different brand, you know, like, and I don't know my Airstreams in and out, but I'd like to hold her vision, which is nice, you know,
So
in terms of the
for
paper.
A, would, instead of saying Airstream, we say Airstream with aluminum siding.
Yeah, I don't know how to write it,
Aren't they all?
Commissioner.
thought they
I'm
were
pretty
all-
sure they're all metal. Yeah,
Airstream are very, very, they're
They're-
the nicest, they're
Yeah.
very nice. So anything after 60s and 70s is going to be a nicer model.
Yeah, they're the really pretty silver Twinkies that people pull behind their cars.
The toasters, I got you.
Exactly. So I feel like, I mean, I could understand saying something like, you know, you don't want 1940s Airstreams, if they even existed, I don't know. But I feel like, you know, what they're going for, these Airstreams they're beautiful. And I feel like saying Airstream is going to hold it to actually being these silver.
Yeah, again, it's kind of, I don't know all of the models they offer, but if you guys have seen their catalog and they're all toasters, then, you know, that would allay my fears too. Yeah.
I'm not,
Just one second.
I'm not worried about later Airstreams. I think that, I really think that anything later is going to be very nice and look very nice. As long as it's Airstream, I feel comfortable. And she has a vested interest in making this profitable. She's putting a lot of money and time and effort into this. I don't think we can understate that either. She's got to make sure that it ends up being profitable for her.
No, I agree with Commissioner Swap, and I will add that, it could potentially be a detriment, like you said, anything could. Having a rental property right there, right across from the powerhouse and the train could also be, you know, a great boom to this business and could help it stay more vibrant and more beautiful than ever. So anything has the potential to go either way, and I understand that, but I feel like all the things that she's done and all the, you know, steps she's put in here to make it a beautiful property, the fact that it's located right there is only going to make it a better place than, say, she put it, you know, down by the baseball field or something like that.
Oh, yeah, anything I say at this point isn't really going to change the fact that it's going in. So yeah, if we have the restriction for Airstreams, and also if we have some sort of a checkup, I think that would be, you know, that would be the best we could do, it sounds like, at this point. I'm still not sure what's going to happen with the screening that you mentioned during the last meeting, Noble.
There's a screen wall on the site plan.
I know on the sides and on the back.
There's one on the front too.
One in the front of,
It's right here.
let's see. The one she just passed out. Right. Well, I apologize, I missed that, so.
I appreciate you explaining your perspective and where you come from. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I see that you're not being arbitrary or argumentative, and that is really valuable to our council. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so other than, my only other question for you then, Rich, is did we decide on camping? Because I feel like we don't necessarily want a bunch of tents. So if we were going to say camping,
So if you would like to add the word tent under C, no tent camping shall be allowed, I would just, whoever makes the motion, please include that in your motion.
okay, awesome, thanks. Because if I said no camping is allowed, I couldn't go there because I would be camping, so.
I think it would, in the interest of the applicant, it would be nice if we could do our best to move this along. So I wonder, is that something that would take more time?
No,
No.
we can change the words.
Okay.
That's fine.
And we wouldn't have to wait
Nope.
another month.
So is anybody interested in making a motion? Okay. I will open up public comment one more time, but just for you.
Thank you, Commissioners. There are a couple points that I want to clarify. I'm not objecting to having parking. I'm objecting to me having a higher standard of paved parking. There is no requirement for paved parking in there. It has to be, gravel or something else, but there's no requirement other than me for paved parking. So I do think that's an important clarification, with respect to this gamble that's being presented out maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I don't know. I think Commissioner Swab's point is an excellent one that deserves reinforcement, and that is you have an instant benefit right here. And with any building, the Brunswick never took off the way that the owner anticipated that it would. There are no guarantees in this life. If we experience another pandemic, it's a detriment to the entire community, not just my property. Keep in mind that there are 2 businesses on that property, and I am intricately involved in those businesses as well. I have a vested interest in keeping all of this to be an attractive, desirable place to stay. So what I'm requesting is that I not be held to a higher standard. And I would like to know what conditional use permits in the last, say, 2 or 3 years have had time constraints placed on them. Because in fairness, I believe that's an important point to bring out into the open. Again, being held to a different standard than any of my colleagues or contemporaries in the community is the antithesis of fair government. So what other businesses have been held to the standard of their conditional use? It certainly wasn't the car wash next to me, because that's a conditional use permit and it's been operating there for decades, and they're attempting to sell it to be a car wash in the future with the new owners utilizing that conditional use permit. So I think it's important to have open government and to be very clear and upfront and forthright about what other businesses have been held to the standard of a life expectancy on their conditional use permit.
And that's something that we could totally discuss with you later at a different time, but we don't have all of that information available to us right now. So, but if you want to talk to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we can get more information on those things. We just don't happen to have that to go over with you right now.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
Is there something that you feel like is within our power that's within the staff recommendation that's different from what the city code dictates?
Yes.
Okay.
So, for example, certainly the paved parking would be one of those on the interior of the lot.
That's the staff recommendation,
Yes.
that it be paved, and the city code says that it doesn't.
The city code does not require that it be paved or concrete. It has to be, I'm not sure what the technical term is, but gravel or covered in some way. So there's certainly that, certainly having I have offered up Airstreams from the beginning. It is my goal to have all 60s and 70s Airstreams, but if one burns down, I don't know about the availability of what I would replace it with. And I've been very upfront from the beginning that the unknown was that ADA unit, because it was going to have to be specialized. So, I think that even requiring me to have Airstreams is above and beyond what the RV ordinance would require. I'm willing to subject myself to that condition, because that's my plan, my goal, my vision is to have a vibrant Airstream community there that fits with the Route 66 theme. When I think about the other recommendations, I guess they're here in front of me. The minimum setback, we're prepared to meet that. The architect has indicated that. The communal recreation space, we're prepared to meet that. I don't have a long list of objections. I believe, though, that when you hold me to standards that you're not holding other business owners to, then you have done a disservice in your government role.
So
Go to the next slide and see if there's any objections to the next set of staff recommendations.
Can I push the button?
hey, Rich.
Can you go to the next slide?
The 6-foot-high wall or fence is required. And again, I point out the disparity there. I am not sure if you're all familiar with the property values as they currently stand in that area and the amount of homelessness that is concentrated in that area, as well as the constant supply of mattresses from St. Vincent de Paul that end up on my property every week. So a wall is self-serving for me as well, but I point out the disparate treatment that is offered to other business owners in order to be able to say that government needs to be fair. It needs to be uniform in its application. And that this body, nor the city council, should be free to be arbitrary and allow some business owners to violate code and others not. Your point, Commissioner Chair Goss, earlier about the fact that some of these things you're not responsible for approving, but it would come back to you if somebody brought it to your attention, therein lies the difference. This city is aware that all parking was removed from that establishment. This city has been aware for months that those concrete barriers are serving as a fence. So it's not just the original approval and the motion that's made, it's the uniform application after that happens. And again, I'm not aware of any conditional use permits that have been time limited.
So we don't have anything to do with the uniform application of making sure what we say happens. Like, that's not something that we have anything to do with. So just to give you a little glimpse into city government, basically what happens is we have redone our code and we've changed the way a lot of things went. And unfortunately or fortunately, all of that stuff was out there and available to the public for the past few years. A lot of changes did happen in the code. And now it's our job to apply that to the different things that come before us. And whether some businesses have been in place for longer than that new code was put in, we don't particularly have the ability to go and retroactively make those changes. Now, don't get me wrong, we would love to, because a lot of them don't look the way we would like them to, but the only ability we have to do is to have things going forward. Now, I feel like the things that we're requiring are kind of in line with what you intend to do anyway. And the fact that we want to put a review in place, I've been on this commission for a long time, and we have been burned by many businesses who have claimed to do exactly the things that you're kind of saying and failed to do it. And if we don't put any kind of review in place, then that gives us absolutely no ability to go and remove that continual use permit for them. So it's not specifically something that we're putting against you because we don't trust you. It's something that we're starting to put in place because we need to have something so that we can come back on people who say they're going to do something and then flat out lie and don't do it, and then we are up a creek without a paddle with another business who has had a continual use permit who is not following what they're doing. So I don't want you to feel as if it's something unfair against you. As a group, we have some new standards that we're trying to apply, and we're trying to do it as fair as possible. And the things that we're putting in place aren't so that we can yank your business out from under you when you're doing a great job. They're so that when somebody promises to put up, a beautiful stone sign and they put up a pole with an LED on the top of it, we can say, that wasn't what you said you were going to do. So if that can reassure you at all that the intent of our doing that is not to harm your business when you have a good heart and a good plan and intend to do what you say, is to protect ourselves from people doing things in this town that they say they're not going to do and then do.
And with all due respect, I'm not objecting to all of these recommendations. I'm objecting to the ones that have been applied differently in my case. All of the examples that I gave you tonight in the photos are all recent post-code amendment. The CUP process in and of itself if I'm hugely successful here tonight and I come away with a conditional use permit, I have to abide by the conditions. Or it resorts to your enforcement mechanism to say, hey, property owner with a conditional use permit, you're not abiding by your conditions. That authority exists by virtue of the fact that this is a conditional use. It is conditioned upon me acting consistent with your approval. And at any point, if I'm not, whether there's a review process built in there or not, your enforcement division can say she's acting inconsistent with the conditional use that was granted to her. We need to enforce it. I guess what I'm saying is you are requiring things of me that you haven't of others. Post-code amendment. For instance, paving the parking. That is a tremendous expense. There's also another factor there. The more I increase the impervious hard surface, then the more likely I am to bear the expense of having to have a retention pond on that property. So you're causing me other expenses and other ramifications by requiring of me something greater than any of the other property owners. There's nothing that requires paved parking internally.
So these photos that you presented to us, none of these projects require conditional use permits? These projects were not brought to the commission for review under the conditional use process. RV parks, storage units, those projects require conditional use permits.
You're absolutely correct. And the Planning and Zoning Commission exists as an arm of the city government. So when I bring you those photos, I'm bringing you those photos as an example of what's happening with city government. I'm prohibited from using turquoise. I'm prohibited from using bright colors. In the very same time frame and in the very same zoning section, we have bright colors and also now turquoise on Beale Street. That's the city of Kingman. Just like you don't enforce, you count on another arm of the city of Kingman to enforce your decisions. It's all the city of Kingman, it's all city of Kingman government. So although I understand your point, there is the city of Kingman as an entity. You function as an arm of that entity. You have no independent authority outside of the city of Kingman. So when I bring you my concerns, I'm bringing you concerns about how the city of Kingman is interacting with me as a business owner and potential developer versus how they're interacting with other business owners in the community. And all of those are recent. All of those have occurred since I started this process, post-zoning code amendment. So again, looking at these, will it be fenced? Yes, for safety, for privacy. The fact, though, that I'm held to a standard of incurring the cost of a 6-foot-high wall or fence when somebody else can use concrete barriers, it doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right for government to play that arbitrary role. Again, the paving versus not paving, a dustless surface, some kind of aggregate, but mine has to be asphalt or concrete
Well,
at additional
Again, I'm going
cost.
back to there's a checklist in the conditional use permit. And that checklist we're applying it to your project.
And that checklist,
We're not involved with the other projects.
and that checklist includes paved parking inside the perimeter?
I believe so. Rich can probably speak to that.
The code does say gravelled or paved, but we're recommending it be paved.
So the code doesn't require pavement. That's an additional cost that I have to bear in order to be able to get this project off the ground, which then also may result in other costs like retention ponds on the property as I increase the impervious surface by abiding by the conditions placed on me.
I appreciate the patience that you've had. I can see that this has been a long process for you when you're already putting a lot of time and effort into it. And I appreciate your patience with the city. We're all raising families here. I have 7 children. We care about this community, and I see that you do too. So I hope that you don't feel like we're being adversarial, because we're all just trying to work together to make Kingman as nice a community as we can. And we want to give business owners good opportunities. I wonder, yeah, I guess I would can we open it up again to council to talk? And
Thank you for the additional time.
You're welcome. All right, I'm closing down public comment and reopening commission discussion.
I guess the only question that I have is, would it be possible to remove the paved? I guess I'd be interested in hearing from Rich whether that's something that they would feel comfortable with, if that falls in line with the city code, or if there's a particular purpose for it being paved.
I think part of the reason we recommend it be paved is, at least in the original layout, there was an opportunity to access both sides of the property. There is some uses on the site that aren't part of the CUP, including the coffee shop and the ice cream shop, that those properties or those uses would normally require a paved parking space. The code does state RV parks may have gravel parking, but it's, again, the commission's purview, I guess, to make that decision as what you feel is the proper standard for development in this area. If this were a regular motel or something like that, they would be required to have paved parking.
Rich, can I ask you a question also? In this new picture that we got, are these 2 parking spaces here outside the gate and then parking spaces inside? Is that what we're seeing?
That's what appears to be what's shown on there.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I could see, I feel like saying, and we've said this in the past, things behind the gate, not necessarily requiring asphalt. I do think that things in front of the gate requiring asphalt would be better, because these 2 parking spaces here are going to have probably more traffic of people coming in and out, and it would bring less, gravel and all that kind of stuff into the street. So if we were going to make a change, I would say that I think these 2 parking spots here outside the fence should be paved, and then if you want to make that change inside, I don't particularly have a problem with that.
Rich, are those are really 2 parking spaces right next to the drive and street, that close to the street?
It appears that's what that is, but I don't know for sure.
I think they're for the ice cream shop and,
I should mention that there is a requirement that the drive itself be paved. That is a standard that's required of the RV park.
the grade driveway.
So we're only talking about the parking spaces?
We're just talking
These
about
right
these
here.
parking spaces right here, inside the gate for the tenants of the park.
What kind of surfacing is required for parking spaces versus the drive aisle?
The parking spaces in the RV park are required to be either paved or a gravelled space, and the drive aisles are required to be like asphalt or concrete paving.
Is dustless mentioned at all or not?
It just says street and access must be accessible from internal private drive, minimum of 20 feet in width, improved to city standards except for curb gutter and sidewalk. That's not required, just the paving.
And I can see that as being, an undue burden on them to pave those spaces. I just think that the outer 2 should remain
Yeah,
paved.
the only issue I would have with it is you're gonna get rocks and dirt coming out onto the street, the main street.
I mean, we could also do a surface that's not asphalt. I know we were discussing this 7 million ways to Sunday when we were talking about the other project. So I know there's lots of other alternatives to paving, but I'm not a contractor.
like to make a motion. Approve CUP, is it 22-0001, as presented by staff, using their recommendations A through I, changing the camping to include tent camping, and adding another line item for staff to bring a report back in 5 years.
Do we have a second? Can I ask one question? Are we not, that's not changing paving, correct? Okay, so I see that we don't have a second.
Can we talk for a couple more minutes about the paving?
Okay. Can we withdraw your motion for a second? Okay.
Okay. So I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about it in terms of Airbnbs and VRBOs. Yeah, I think it's important to follow the city code. And I'm, I guess, a little bit confounded about what to do about this. A lot of Airbnbs and VRBOs have paved driveways and a lot don't. I guess I'm curious about your experience with how much gravel it would bring into the road. Is that something that you see being a?
Just depends on how it's put in place, if it's compacted properly, it's gonna deteriorate at some point. 5 years, might be a year.
Commissioner Noble, can you make sure that you speak into the microphone? I'm sorry.
I guess I'm also curious if the applicant has an option to appeal if we pass this as the staff recommends, does the applicant have the opportunity, if they're upset with that, to appeal that specific piece of it?
Yes, CUP is effective 10 days after the commission has approved it, unless it's appealed, and the appeal would go to the council. So if the applicant was dissatisfied with the condition of the commission, they could appeal that to the council.
But I feel like we could avoid that. Rich, what are some options other than gravel that we could put in place other than asphalt?
Yeah, I think that the two options in the code would be, some type of pavement surface, hard surface, like asphalt or concrete, or a gravelled surface for the parking spaces. I don't know that I would want to try to come up with some other idea for this one, since that's kind of what the code actually says.
Okay.
Mhm.
Plus, it's more government management.
I don't particularly have a problem with the gravel inside the fence, because since that is allowed by the code, I don't see a big problem with that as long as we pave outside the fence. But
Is that something that you're uncomfortable with, gravel, because of that?
Me personally, I would rather see pavement or concrete we're talking about a commercial site. It's not somebody's house.
Okay.
Commissioner Goss,
Mhm.
you mind if I speak for a minute?
Sure.
So as you guys are sitting here trying to figure out which way to go, is just a little bit more on the history of kind of why we, again, we've put a lot of time and effort into this, and we've thought a lot of this through. A lot of the reason on why we've made this recommendation is because this is not a traditional project.
Right.
Okay, and we've already proven that, having to make code amendments and things like that. The other issues that we have is, what part of the code do we pull this from? Do we pull this as a trailer park, or as it's been mentioned, is this as a hotel, right? So we're kind of stuck in the middle, and we're trying to come up with what we think is the best. Doesn't mean that it is, but that's why these recommendations were made. They were made based upon, obviously, the experience that we have, as well as what was said in the previous meetings. So that's where we are with it. Keep in mind, what it really comes down to is these are just recommendations, right? It doesn't mean that's what we have to go with.
Thank you. I'm comfortable passing your motion if you want to say it again.
You can put it back up.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve CUP 22-0001 as presented by staff, with staff recommendations A through I, changing, I think it was C, from just regular camping to tent camping, and adding another, I guess it'd be, what, J, for staff to bring a report back in 5 years.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Can I get a roll call vote?
Vice Chair Noble,
Yes.
Chair Goss. Approve. Commissioner Swab,
Approve.
Commissioner Waters,
Approve.
Commissioner Marino is also excused, and we do have, a motion has approved.
Motion approved. Good job, guys. All right, next we move to announcement by commission members. Limited to announcements, availability, or attendance at conferences and seminars, requests for agenda items for future meetings, and requests for reports from staff. No discussion on any of these items. Does anyone on the commission have anything to say? I see none. All we have left is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.